Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the older diseases, and we've been seeing that throughout the years, some of the things that were big in kind of like the Dark Ages, Black Plague and so forth, but some of the other ones are kind of rearing their ugly heads yet once again. President Trump now, he's officially in office and he's making some political waves. And we're going to talk a little bit about the activities involving Israel. Well, like I said before, the age-old disease, this one here is rearing its ugly head once again. This time showing up in the state of Kansas. The disease, tuberculosis, or TB for short. Well, there are 2 counties in the state that have reported 67 active cases and 79 latent cases. Now, the latent cases are the ones where people have tuberculosis, are not sick, and as a result cannot spread it to others.
Well, this outbreak started back in January of 2024. Now, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment Deputy Secretary for Public Health Ashley Goss said, quote, "We have and still have mobilized staff and resources addressing an unprecedented tuberculosis outbreak in one of our counties."
Dr. Dana Hawkinson with the University of Kansas Health Systems said in an interview about the outbreak, quote, "Symptoms range from very mild to extremely ill." Now, patients who have had long-term symptoms and who finally seek medical care, well, by that time, they're typically the ones that are the extremely ill cases. Now, treatment for the disease is available and has been for a long time, and those treatments usually last about 6 months. Symptoms of TB, in case you're wondering, include coughing, chest pains, fever, and fatigue. Now, contact tracing, is very important for the medical community to determine others who have come into contact with an infected person.
Well, doctors say that there's not much you can do to prevent getting TB because it's an airborne disease. But if you do, help public health officials to trace your contacts because that will help stop the spread.
Well, the birds are sick and grounded, but their egg prices are soaring, with current prices in some states hovering around, now get this, $15 a dozen. I remember when you can get eggs for less than $1 a dozen. Well, birds aren't the only ones sick. That's right, consumers are too. Officials have detected a new rare strain of bird flu on a duck farm in California. Now, that farm was forced to destroy nearly 119,000 birds. Another farm on Long Island had to kill 100,000 ducks. And in Illinois, a farm called Caboodle Farm lost 3,000 hens in a matter of days. Now, although there has been 76 human cases of bird flu so far, no person-to-person transmission has been reported.
All right, that's an incredible amount of birds there in just a few farms.
just 3 farms. Mm-hmm.
Well, President Trump is pausing communications from health agencies until more information is clear. Now, Dr. Ashish Jha, a dean with Brown University School of Public Health, said in an interview with ABC News, quote, "Surveillance and testing can keep bird flu from being disruptive. I'm worried we're going to make the same set of mistakes like we did with COVID." And of course, he's saying that we need more testing right away so that it doesn't get out of hand, hoping that they can try to catch it and stop the spread.
That's right. Well, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the former Israeli security minister who resigned over the Israel-Gaza ceasefire, recently expressed his disapproval for the deal, citing, quote, "The opening of the Netzarim corridor and the entry of tens of thousands of Gazans into the northern Gaza Strip are images of Hamas victory and another humiliating part of the reckless deal. This is not what complete victory looks like, this is what complete surrender looks like. We must return to war and destroy.
Wow, that's like a total lack of any type of compassion.
Oh, for sure.
For the Gaza people.
Absolutely.
Well, President Trump has a message for President Putin regarding the war with Ukraine. What's the Trump administration's plans in regards to Russia, and how does Russia perceive Washington's words? Well, take a look at this next video for more on the situation.
President Putin wants to meet. He's said that even publicly. And we have to get that war over with. That's a bloody mess.
Donald Trump wants the Ukraine war to end. So far, this seems like an undeniable fact. He has spoken about the war regularly since taking office, and he seems impatient. He wants the war to end immediately, and he's not above arm twisting to get his way. Here's a post that Trump put up on social media. He starts on a conciliatory note, saying, and I'm quoting, he is not looking to hurt Russia. He goes on to describe his good relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin and reminds the world about Moscow's role in the Second World War. It is rare for Americans to praise the Soviet Union, but here's Trump commending Moscow's role. After this friendly intro, Trump gets down to business. He says he's doing Putin, and I'm quoting again, a very big favor. And then he tells him to stop this ridiculous war. That's a bold move, threatening Putin while calling it a favor. Donald Trump says if the war does not end soon, he will have no choice but to impose taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on Russia and its partner countries. And then Trump follows up with a classic line. I'm quoting, "We can do it the easy way or the hard way." Yes, it seems Hollywood has made its way to international diplomacy. Donald Trump is using cliched dialogues to put pressure on Vladimir Putin, and the Russians are not impressed. Some Russian politicians and nationalists see these threats as an insult. Prominent Russian bloggers called Trump arrogant. They say Moscow will not be blackmailed. This is the view of some Putin supporters, but the Russian president himself has been more measured. The Kremlin seems to be downplaying the threats.
We do not see any particularly new elements here. Trump was the president of America who more often than anyone else resorted to the methods of sanctions. He is fond of these methods. At least he liked them during his first presidency. We are carefully watching all the rhetorics and statements. We carefully record all the nuances.
So Russia is being cautious. And what about Ukraine, the other main party in the war? Well, Kiev seems ecstatic about Trump's tough talk.
So we do really welcome such strong messages.
It was a really strong message and strong signal. We need to increase pressure on Russia and to force Russia to negotiate. We need USA leadership. We need more engagement of USA.
Chance to get new dynamic.
That was Ukraine's foreign minister praising Donald Trump at Davos. This is a city in Switzerland famous for hosting the World Economic Forum, or WEF. The WEF, the meeting is still underway, and Trump spoke there last night. He proposed a solution to end the Ukraine war.
And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which, frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war. They should have done it long ago.
Trump wants oil prices to come down. He's going to lean on oil-producing countries to bring the price down. OPEC stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. It's basically an oil cartel. It controls global oil prices by tweaking the supply. Donald Trump says he will ask them to bring the prices down. He thinks lower oil prices will hurt Russia. If prices go down, Russian oil exports will bring in less money. This would hurt the Russian economy and force Moscow to end the war in Ukraine. This is what Trump believes. It isn't a novel idea. Trump's predecessor thought of this too. Joe Biden also wanted OPEC to cut oil prices. He even went to Saudi Arabia to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Some of you may remember the infamous fist bump. That was basically Joe Biden groveling after having spent years threatening MBS. Promising to make him a global pariah, Biden was desperate to get OPEC to bring down oil prices, and that's why he went to meet MBS. Of course, it did not work. Now, Donald Trump wants to try the same thing, and he might actually have a shot. After all, Trump has maintained good ties with MBS. So the Saudi crown prince might do him a favor and help lower oil prices. But will this really help stop the war in Ukraine? Moscow does not think so.
Зеленский не может быть готов к заключению сделки.
This conflict is not dependent on oil prices. This conflict is due to the threat to Russian national security, to the threat to Russians who live in the known territories, and the complete refusal of Americans and Europeans to listen to Russia's concerns. This is not related to oil prices.
The Kremlin says oil prices won't affect the war, but it added that Putin is ready to talk to Trump.
Well, we've seen in times past kind of been Trump's go-to is the tariffs, you know, in dealing with countries who are not as cooperative with the United States as he would like. But, you know, to use these references, those are still, even though they're Hollywood-based, pretty powerful words. We can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Right, but it's interesting that Trump thinks that this can all be solved by lowering the oil prices.
Right, yeah. No, it can't be. Well, Israel has put a ban on the United Nations Relief and Work Agency that serves Palestinian refugees. The organization, called UNRWA for short, has been serving Palestinians for over 75 years. Now, while there have been protests against the organization in occupied East Jerusalem, the ban prohibits Israelis from having any contact at all with UNRWA in Gaza or the West Bank. Now, UNRWA was created by the UN back in 1949 to aid Palestinians who have been forcibly displaced during the Nakba, or in English, catastrophe.
Nakba was a time period of mass expulsion of the Palestinians from Israel when it established itself as a country. Now, there were many Palestinians murdered and many homes destroyed, which resulted in approximately 700,000 more being displaced and fleeing from their homes to become refugees. Now, that was 80% of the Palestinian population at that time.
Today, UNRWA supports almost 6 million Palestinians in 58 camps across the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and in the countries of Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. The agency has 709 schools in which over 500,000 children are currently enrolled. And UNRWA also sees to health needs of these refugees with 140 primary health care centers. Now, there are 30,000 Palestinians employed in UNRWA staff, and the United Nations agency also supports Palestinians' right to return, as was written into the UN General Assembly Resolution 194. Israel, of course, rejects this resolution.
Well, President Trump is taking a hard line on immigration, now returning them to their homelands by the plane loads. Now, in an attempt to send Colombian nationals, the Colombian president did not allow the flight to land. So Trump then threatened to slap 25% tariffs on Colombian exports to the U.S. if he didn't accept the delivery of people back to his country. Now, please take a look at this report from ABC 10 News to see exactly how things played out. Take a look.
Tonight, a Colombian plane lands at MCAS Miramar to pick up deported migrants.
The U.S. and Colombia pulling away from the brink of a tariff war. This comes after President Donald Trump threatened tariffs and sanctions on Colombia for initially refusing to accept military flights carrying deportees over the weekend.
ABC 10 News reporter Laura Acevedo was breaking down the situation as the U.S. and Colombia make a deal on a deportation flight.
Well, Kimberly and Wale, that Colombian plane landed here at MCAS Miramar just before 8:30 tonight. And roughly 5 minutes before that touchdown, we saw Border Patrol vans escort 2 buses onto the base. After a weekend of back and forth, a Colombian Air Force plane landing at MCAS Miramar to pick up 110 deportees. The Colombian government announcing their plans to pick up their citizens on X, sharing these pictures of the crew before takeoff. A CBP spokesperson confirming the plane was expected to land at Miramar Monday evening and that those being deported were CBP detainees, all Colombian nationals. The spokesperson says all of them were apprehended by CBP agents and officers, primarily Border Patrol, adding most had crossed the border illegally. The diplomatic showdown started early Sunday morning when Colombia blocked 2 U.S. military flights carrying undocumented immigrants from landing in the country, as the flights were already in the air. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro saying on X Sunday he returned the planes because he says a migrant is not a criminal, adding they should be treated with dignity. Within hours, President Trump promising to impose 25% tariffs on Colombian imports and visa sanctions. By Sunday evening, the White House saying Colombia's president had agreed to Trump's terms.
There's a new sheriff in town, and the sheriff is fond of tariffs, shall we say.
Ron B. is an expert on international relations who says having a country send a plane to come pick up their own nationals is unheard of. He thinks this weekend's back and forth sets a precedent for other countries.
Well, he's sending a message to other countries saying, well, look, we're serious about this to the point where we will use our economic leverage to make sure it happens.
President Trump standing down on tariffs for now, but keeping visa sanctions in place until the first plane of deportees arrives back in Colombia.
Katana, I could see why that some people are looking at this as hopefully it's not starting a pattern that the Colombian themselves have to send their own plane to pick up their people, right. And some people are saying, well, I'm hoping that the United States isn't going to require us to do the same thing.
Guess we'll see. Well, President Donald Trump has also made threats that he will take back the Panama Canal if Panama doesn't guard against China's attempts at building ties with the country through the Belt and Road Initiative, among other things. Well, Panama has only been in control of its canal for the past 25 years. And to understand the dynamics between the United States and Panama over the canal, please pay attention to this video.
It's been a quarter of a century since the United States handed over the Panama Canal and the Panama Canal Zone to Panama.
Panama has been managing the canal for the past 25 years without any problems, more efficiently than it was handled before. It's been part of Panama's identity.
But it wasn't always so. For nearly 80 years, the zone inhabited by Americans, known as Zonians, was off-limits to Panamanians. The United States had the right to govern and control an area twice the size of Singapore, including 14 U.S. military bases. It cut through the heart of a country that in many ways was created in exchange for permission to build what former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt called an epic feat. With U.S. military help, Panama declared independence from Colombia in 1903, allowing Roosevelt to build the Panama Canal, an engineering wonder that made navigation possible between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But Panamanians soon demanded sovereignty over the canal zone.
The Panama riots were touched off at a...
It was January the 1964 when a group of Panamanian students came here to what was the Balboa High School, only for American students. They were carrying a Panamanian flag, which they insisted should also be hoisted next to the U.S. flag right here. A scuffle ensued, and the Panamanian students then joined others further down to the main road. And that's where a group of American soldiers came, gunned down and killed 20 of them and injured 500 others. For Panama, that was the last straw. The president of Panama broke diplomatic ties with the U.S. and said that they would not be renewed until Washington decided to seriously negotiate the return of the canal zone. The U.S. agreed, but negotiations weren't completed until 1977, when General Omar Torrijos and President Jimmy Carter signed 2 treaties that would gradually allow Panama to take full control of the canal at the end of the 20th century.
It marked a new era of the United States' relation with Latin America and with the world. So I think, it was not a gift, it was a struggle.
The former president and son of General Torrijos says his father and President Carter were able to end colonialism through peaceful means. In the 25 years that Panama has been in charge, maritime traffic through the canal has increased significantly. More than half of the roughly 1,400 vessels that pass through it each year use a third set of locks, built by Panama to allow larger, more modern container ships to go through. And despite their checkered history, the United States and Panama have remained close allies, until now.
Well, the Belt and Road Initiative that China has been working on for years, and really allowing China to have their hands in a lot of different countries, their infrastructure and so forth. You can see why President Trump says, no, you're not going to do this with the canal as well. So, of course, that is, he's warning Panama, look, you better break these ties with China or we're taking it back.
Interesting.
Well, speaking of China, now the Beijing military city might be the world's largest military command center ever, and it's already being built underground. Now, the building site is covering 1,500 acres of land, which is 10 times larger than the Pentagon, which is the head of the United States Defense Department. Now, in comparison, the Pentagon claims to be larger than 100 American football fields. So, can you imagine something 10 times bigger than that?
Yeah, that's amazing. The underground facility will have extensive tunnels and bunkers. It's being built out of heavily reinforced concrete, and some claim it will be able to survive nuclear attacks, including bunker buster bombs. Now, it is presumed that Xi Jinping would have everything he would need to run a war from this state-of-the-art underground city. Now, observers agree that this is a fair assessment, and the Beijing military city will be used in place of the Western Hills complex, which was built in the Cold War era and used as China's current wartime headquarters.
But why is China pushing such a grand plan forward? Well, simply to gain recognition as a major military power. Now, this will give China's government an office that conforms to that description. While security is tight on the building site, there are reportedly 100 cranes located there. Photographs are forbidden in the area, and drones are not allowed to be flown in the area either. Now, there have been checkpoints installed to restrict movement of people around the area and only grant access to those involved with the project. While the project was initially being kept quiet, it was too large to keep a secret for long.
Oh yeah, and it kind of makes me think about the massive undertaking that the United States and other countries were involved in with the Manhattan Project, right. And the huge cities that were set up and the infrastructures and the people, and that was kept a lot more hush-hush than what we can do now because of the advent of social media, drones, devices and everything. It's kind of hard to keep something that massive of an operation under wraps for very long.
Right, and that's a great comparison, but you see that China, they're operating something from the Cold War, so you could say, yeah, it was time for an update, but to simply build something that big to establish yourself as a military superpower, you can see that all of these efforts are not going the direction of peace, but they're getting ready, as they said, to be able to continue to fight a war from underground.
That's right.
Well, if you want to learn more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call the House of Yahweh at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit the House of Yahweh by going to any of their sites at Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, and Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And again, don't forget the Israel Says and Ask Israel programs available online for your learning enjoyment. You can find those programs by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another classic message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.